So what is it about infrared saunas? Because we can't seem to get enough of them. Once considered a luxury at spas and boutique gyms, infrared saunas are seemingly everywhere now. But with so much variety and competition, how do you know what brand to go with or what type of sauna to choose? Well, I certainly can't decide that for you, but what I can do is help narrow things down by sharing a list of the top 5 most important factors to think about when buying an infrared sauna, starting with space. So where you plan to put it will ultimately determine the size and type of infrared sauna to get. But just keep in mind the smallest one-person infrareds are typically about 6 to 6.5 feet tall and 4 feet deep. So you want to make sure you have the space for that, and they will require some type of dedicated 120 volt, 20 amp circuit and outlet. So if you don't have the room or you don't have the electrical hookup, and you can't because you live in an apartment and they got strict rules, then you might want to consider something that's a little bit more portable, something like the sauna space or the higher dose blanket. Though I definitely would caution you guys to stay away from those portable personal steam saunas on Amazon. I know they have a lot of reviews, but I'll tell you from some inside sources that they're terrible. Not to mention, they look ridiculous. But moving on to setup and prep time. And before we get into the details of that, I think we should probably talk a little bit about shipping. So you can expect it's gonna take a couple weeks, if not months, depending on where you live, for most cabin deliveries, especially when it comes to the Sunlighten. I can speak from experience on this, although we did live in Hawaii, so there's that. But if you're an impatient sauna goer like myself, your best bet for the quickest sweat session is to probably go with something like the higher dose sauna blanket. And then when it comes to actually setting up a sauna cabin, well, I do recommend wrangling a friend or maybe someone that owes you a favor and budget at least 2 hours for the full assembly, maybe longer, depending on the model, depending on how well you read instructions. Now, I did admittedly watch a lot of Home Improvement as a kid. I mean, mainly for Jonathan Taylor Thomas, but that's besides the point. Anyway, I learned everything about dad jokes and nothing about construction from that show. So to say I felt ill-equipped to assemble a 3-person sauna, that would be an understatement. And yet, here we are. I totally did it, not on my own, but still, I consider it a BFD. Sure, the boxes were heavy, but I gotta say, the instructions were clear, and all the wood panels of the Sunlighten fit together using magnets. Now, on the other end of the assembly spectrum is something as easy as the higher dose sauna blanket, which takes about 2 minutes to set up. I mean, everything comes pre-assembled, so really all you have to do is plug it in and turn it on. But moving right along, another big factor that you'll want to consider is temperature. And let's just get this out of the way right now. No matter what model that you end up choosing or how many additional fancy light panels you throw into it, infrared saunas, they will never get as hot as dry saunas. Now, that is not to say that they don't get hot. And in fact, I'd say the Amplify 3 model that we had, it got all the way up to like 168, 170 degrees Fahrenheit, or 77 degrees for my Celsius friends. And that's higher than most other infrareds on the market, I've gotta say. Still, dry saunas, they can get the room up to 220 degrees or something like that. So if you're just simply looking for the hottest potential sweat box that money can buy, you might want to consider looking in the dry space instead. Just saying. But coming back to infrareds, and you will find that most models, they'll max out around 150 degrees Fahrenheit, with the exception of a couple from Sunlighten and CLEARLIGHT. But again, those include some additional infrared heating panels, usually at the front. Now, you'll definitely get hot and sweat. It's just a different type of heat, like the one that you get from sitting in the sun too long. It's kind of a slow burn. It seems totally fine at first until out of nowhere, it creeps up on you and becomes unbearably hot. And then I've always found with infrared saunas that you end up just sweating a lot more after the fact than, say, if you're in a dry sauna. I don't know if that has to do with just being in the sauna longer, but that's definitely something to keep in mind, especially if you're planning to go to a meeting or something right after your sauna. You might still be perspiring. But prep time wise, most of the cabins, they take about an hour to reach their max heat. Again, it's gonna depend on the size and the number of heaters you have in there. Nowadays, a lot of saunas though make it easy on you. They give you the option to preheat your sauna remotely, sometimes through an app, sometimes just using the panel. Although the Rocky Mountain sauna that I have right now, it doesn't do that. So I have to do it old school way, turn it on and wait patiently. Not my forte. But in any event, when it comes to something like the higher dose blanket, I've got to say this thing heats up very quickly. Obviously it's a much smaller surface area, but still, I mean, it only takes 20 to 30 minutes to get to max temp. And it definitely starts getting toasty around that 15-minute mark, which is usually when I'll get in. Turning now to the pros and the cons and my overall experience with all these different saunas, starting with the Sunlighten. And aesthetically, these cabins are gorgeous. Everything about them, from the high quality wood to the carbon coated heaters that are subtle, everything is done in a tasteful way that feels refined and not over the top. I was low-key obsessed with our Sunlighten in Hawaii, which is funny because I didn't really need to get any hotter in Hawaii, but I did end up spending more time than I'd like to admit in there. I mean, partly because it was a great heat experience. I mean, the Amplify got really, really hot, but it was also partly for the entertainment because, well, if there's three things I love doing most in life simultaneously, it is sweating profusely, binging Huberman Lab episodes on my own, and messing around with remote-controlled colored lights until I end up getting a headache. Needless to say, Sunlighten did check all those boxes for me, and I'd say it's hands down a great choice if you're looking for a sauna to be really hot, like close to dry, or if you just really want to have an efficient sauna because you will get twice as sweaty in half the time. Moving on to the Rocky Mountain sauna, the one I currently have, I'd say these are a tier or two below Sunlighten in terms of quality and design, but also in price. We'll get to that in a sec. Now, it's not to say these saunas aren't sturdy or built to last. In fact, we got this one secondhand. I think it was owned twice before us. We got on next door. I will say though, aesthetics-wise, that wood finish on the outside, it does look a bit unnatural. It's missing a couple screws. That might be my fault. And parts of the interior, you can see that they're starting to splinter off. So that's not great. But it also doesn't get nearly as hot. This Colorado model, it maxes out at 150 degrees. And so it does take me much longer, I'd say 45 minutes to an hour, to really get a good sweat on. But on the plus side, it does come with Bluetooth speakers and some chromotherapy lighting. And I do love that this sauna actually comes with floor heaters, whereas the Amplify model I had did not. And then moving on to the last of the portable saunas, we finally come to the higher dose. And let's start by talking comfort, because they've made a couple changes to this new sauna blanket, which is version 4.0, that I think are worth noting. For one, the blanket now comes with zippers, instead of Velcro. So that makes it a whole lot easier just to get in and out all on your own. They've also come out with a special towel insert that you can now wear in place of clothes to protect the skin and keep the blanket clean during your sessions. It is an extra 90 bucks, I know, but I do use it all the time, even in my sauna cabin. Weird, I know. But I guess for me, it seems worth it because I go through a lot less towels that way. And then the second upgraded feature is the heat. So this time around, the max setting, it gets well into the 150s, really edging right on 160. And I can say for certain, at least for me, it feels really hot. But like even at the highest setting, I think that's a little too hot for me. So I kind of prefer to stay around that 6 to 7 setting mark. And then the other thing to note is that last time when I did this review, I talked about the bottom of the sauna blanket getting really spicy. It's not as hot as before. I think the heat is just a little bit more widely dispersed. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still warm, but it is significantly better. And because it's actually portable, you're not bound to being in one location when you use it. So you can move it from your bed to the floor, or really just anywhere that you have a 6 by 6 foot space. Just make sure that it's heat resistant. Not to mention being hands-free, it does give you the freedom to do other things or maybe even multitask while you're sweating it out. I know I should probably not be answering emails and I should actually relax, but you know, it is an option if you want it. So there's that. But downsides wise, yes, you are confined to a blanket. So it's a pretty small surface area. Definitely a lot less wiggle room than you'll get in a cabin. And it doesn't have all the bells and whistles of a cabin either. You're not gonna get your fancy chromotherapy lighting or your reservation mode, the surround sound speakers, although that would be dope. Higher dose, just saying. But then again, it's a trade-off because there's just so much less stress around having to disassemble it or have to sell it when you move. So it's nice to be able to just fold it up and stow it away when you're done. You can even travel with it if you want. And if you live in a tight living space, I'd say this is really the sauna that you might want to begin with. Which brings us to the final point on saunas, and that is price. So working our way from high to low, and you'll for sure pay a premium if you go with certain sauna brands, namely Sunlighten and CLEARLIGHT. Yes, they are supremely well designed. There's a reason they have a reputation like they do, and they come with certain amenities that might make the price actually worth it for you. But keep in mind, these two companies do have a very strong foothold in the industry, so expect to pay more, just because. That being said, I have tried a lot of saunas over the years. I gotta say, the Sunlighten ones, they are still my favorite by far. But just because I love their products doesn't necessarily mean I agree with all their business practices. They make it nearly impossible for you to find out anything having to do with pricing without having to get on the phone with one of their representatives. Same thing goes for CLEARLIGHT as well, and a couple other companies. And they really don't want content creators talking any numbers either. Now, personally, I think that's bullshit, and that customers have every right to know the prices up front. So it's really hard for me to say for sure what the prices are. All I know is that roughly you can expect to pay somewhere between $5,000 to $10,000 depending on the model when it comes to the two companies, Sunlighten and CLEARLIGHT. As for Rocky Mountain and a few others like it, including J&H and Almost Heaven, most of these saunas, they're going to start around $3K. And you can sometimes find them being sold on third-party sites for even a bit less. Just make sure it's a reputable site that you're buying from. So finally, we come to the higher dose. and their sauna blanket is the cheapest. It retails for $600. I mean, sure, it's still a lot of money for what's essentially an oversized sleeping bag, but it is portable, and it does get hotter than my Rocky Mountain for a fraction of the cost. So there are a lot of options out there. I know buying a sauna at the end of the day can be a pretty big investment, both space-wise and maybe financially. So if you can, my best advice would be to take the time and try out some different models for yourself. Go to a local gym, go to a biohacking place or spa or something like that. I don't know. I've seen them everywhere. Just Google it. But I would do that before rushing into a decision, because once you set it up, yeah, well, you got it. You're kind of stuck with it. Now, on a personal note, I actually ordered the higher dose blanket before getting the Sunlighten, just to get a feel for how much I would actually sauna each week, which could be a good test. So maybe this is not necessary if you're already committed to getting a cabin, but it can be a really great place to start if you're still on the fence or if you're on a tight budget. So that's it on saunas. I hope you found this video interesting and useful. If you did, maybe share it with a friend, consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and until we meet again, I cannot wait to catch you on the next one.